I think we're about to. Yes, we're there.
Live.
Shark Jack from Cat and Cloud. Hey, dude, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing, Lee?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I'm really excited about talking all the money things with you.
Yeah, dude, I'm stoked to be here, and that's what I like. I love talking about this stuff with people, so bring it on.
It's really hard to find people who understand it, and I have got so many questions around it. I feel like a stupid person because I don't know these things, and then I realize like it's okay that you don't know these things. There are not a lot of people that know these things.
Yeah, totally.
So, like right off the bat, you came into coffee in an unusual way, right?
Yeah, and give my little kind of origin story.
Yeah.
Yeah, my super quick background. I spent 6-7 years working on Wall Street, doing different investment work. I wanted to get out of that and do something where I was using my background for something like a little bit more meaningful for me. I ended up through a friend of mine working with an NGO nonprofit called TechnoServe in Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Sudan on a coffee project they had that basically was working to take farmers who were kind of being taken advantage of, to help them form cooperatives, give them better processing equipment, connect them with buyers in the US and Europe, and really see the amount of money that's coming back to them increase over time. So yeah, that was kind of how I got into coffee in the first place.
So you went from suit. Trust me, I've been there. I was with IBM for 8 years as a project manager and senior business analyst. So it was really strange being a suit and then going behind a coffee machine. So you then went straight to Origin after that, right?
Yeah. So I showed up, my kind of first coffee experience, I showed up in Addis, like the capital of Ethiopia. Spent a lot of time in the offices there meeting local people on the ground. And, a few days later, I was in a car out to some coffee growing regions in Western Ethiopia, visit my first coffee farm, meet our partners in the program and see what they were doing. And just eyes wide open at that point.
What were I imagine the learning curve was super steep. What was because you were still a finance guy at that point. You're a coffee guy totally now, but then you were still a finance guy. What was what were the learning curves like?
Yeah, they're huge. And there were some really amazing lifetime coffee people that were part of that program. Carl Servone was one of them. The country director, Mefde, who'd, grown up in Ethiopia and been in the industry for a long time. This guy, another guy, Bahailu, who works for Starbucks now in Ethiopia. But these people that had, 20, 30 plus years in coffee in East Africa, they're kind of talking me through the goals of the projects and really with the goal, essentially what the program did was double farmer incomes. And you do that through agronomic support, through connecting them with buyers and just higher quality coffee, and then just the ability to market that around the world.
When we say double the farmer incomes, like from what to what at that time?
Yeah, so, right. Roughly, so just to convert it kind of all to dollars, they were probably receiving around, for the coffee that they're producing. And again, it becomes like a bigger conversation of, on any coffee farm, there's like some amount that's really low quality that goes to the local market. There's some, call it 80 to 85 that goes to Starbucks and Pete's. And then kind of like that 86 and above that goes to the Rituals, Verves, us, Four Barrels. So kind of taking all of that together, they were kind of, doubling. Essentially, maybe they're getting like, between $1 and $1.50, and getting that up to kind of like the 250 to 3 range once it's all like weighted in by the different types of coffee that they're producing.
From the kinds of dollars the prices that I'm hearing at the moment, that doesn't sound, it's still low, but it's not ridiculous compared to some of the ridiculous numbers I've been hearing. Is that right?
It is. And it's just different in every country, right? So, it's going to be different in Central America, right? Where a lot of the cost of production is maybe around like $1 to $1.50. Brazil, right? There's going to be a different cost of production. Ethiopia, different cost of production, particularly related to like currencies and you know, how the dollar translates into like local currencies in different places. So for them, a lot of the farmers that were initially in that program didn't know what prices were. I mean, they'd have essentially what they called coyotes that would come to the farms and just be like, here's the price I'm giving you, take it or not. And it would be an incredibly low price. And, you know, they were getting taken advantage of. So just increasing like farmer transparency around knowing what world and market prices are has been huge. And then, you know, how far a dollar will go in places like Ethiopia or South Sudan, you know, is hugely important relative to maybe just trade in like local currency, the Ethiopian birr.
I would love for you to help me with something, help me become unstupid about this.
Right.
So we've been learning about terms like FOB, and we've been learning about terms like farm gate.
Yep.
Can you help us understand, like, let's say, not even from the picking point, like, where is the money broken up along the supply chain?
Yeah, totally. Right. So there's kind of like a farm gate price that the farmer receives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then there's some additional piece that's put in there for the exporter, right? Getting it to the port. And then usually, right, in Ethiopia, there's usually like an exporter, and then oftentimes then it's the importer, like taken to the US or Australia or somewhere like that. You want to throw out like Cafe Imports or somebody, and then they're taking another little piece for that kind of transit getting there. So, I mean, there's that. I guess even within the farm gate price, right, it's the coffee comes from the farm. It goes to the, you know, for a lot of places that are co-ops, right? So the cherries get delivered to the co-ops. The co-ops are the ones really putting everything together. They're delivering it to the dry mills who are getting paid a little piece for, right, for dry milling it before it gets to the exporter and things like that. So there's little bits that are taken out all along there, but really the farmer usually only gets kind of like an upfront payment that isn't the full amount, and then it has to wait until it's sold. Like the money comes back to the co-op, and then the co-op makes what's called a second payment to the farmers who brought their cherry. And so that's maybe not really understood a lot of the time, that farmers are really only getting a small amount up front. You know, even from like really high quality coffee, they're having to wait until this whole process happens. The money comes back to the co-op, and hopefully the money's managed well through that process, and the co-op is managing the money well to give the proper amount of money that still flows back into all the farmers. And so that's actually a lot of what I spent my time with when I was in Ethiopia, was working with the co-ops and making sure that that money was flowing through the system and actually getting back to all the farmers. Because for sure you could have really poorly run co-ops where farmers get a little bit of money up front, and then they're waiting, you know, they're waiting for the rest of their money. And if it's a really poorly managed co-op, or something, if there's corruption or something happens to the money along the way,
That's the word I just wrote down.
They may not get any more money back, you know, after being promised, you know, maybe they get 25 to 50% up front, but they're really waiting on that 50 to 75% from that second payment, you know, as like a big portion of their payment.
And that second payment could be, and correct me if this is a question, I'm not making a statement. That second payment could be months down the track, right?
Oh, it's definitely months down the track. It could be 6 to 9 months down the track, particularly in Ethiopia, where all the money flows through the government, right? There's not really like free trade or free money flows. Like everything flows through the government. They're controlling all the dollar exchange, and then it flows back into like the local banks, and then to the co-ops, and then to the farmers. So it was commonplace for us when we were there to be knocking on doors and trying to push money from one agent to the next.
Does that still happen now?
I can't say 100%. I have to imagine that it does, because while I don't know if you've seen the news, like there's a lot of promising things happening in Ethiopia right now with the new government and some of the new regulations. So hopefully they're trying to work on a way to kind of speed that process up. But, you know, I haven't heard anything concrete about that really being sped up that much. And I think even in the best systems, there's always going to be maybe like 3 to 6 months before that second payment comes in, right? Because that payment's coming from, you know, cat and cloud paying our, paying who we pay, and that money goes back to the country, and then that money, it still gets split up, and so there's still, you have to wait for that coffee to be sold before the farmer.
And the traceability on the money, I mean, forget the traceability on the coffee, but even the traceability on the money, that's not very good either, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally going to be a reflection of each individual party that handles the money. And I think that's when you hear people talk about blockchain. I mean, that's where the opportunity, for this overall register to kind of like track the transparency of coffee. Maria Cleveland, who's somebody who's been like a mentor to us, to Chris and Jared and I in the industry, was here a few weeks ago talking to us, and she's working with a group that's working on transparency through the through the money supply chain, and working to look at something like blockchain and see how that could increase transparency throughout the supply chain. So I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a huge potential to improve that, just because really right now the transparency is only as good as each company involved in it, and one person or one miscommunication or anything like that could potentially disrupt the whole system.
Given that, just on the blockchain thing, there are a number of people that are working on it behind the curtains, because we've been contacted by a bunch of people who have heard these conversations we've been having this month, and they've said, hey, listen, we haven't announced that we're working on blockchain technology for the coffee industry and for the supply chain, but would you be interested in hearing what we're working on? So it's really promising. I'm glad that there are a fuck ton of people that want to move in that direction.
Yeah, it's really promising. And just to be clear, like, it's totally separate. Like, people hear like blockchain and like cryptocurrencies, like,
oh, they're not the same.
Totally separate from
like they're not the same thing.
But the actual blockchain technology is really interesting. I think the thing, and people that I've talked about are like so enthusiastic, but you really need to spend time on the ground in these origin countries, in Colombia, in Ethiopia, in Guatemala, if you're going to try to bring a totally new technology to to a place where there's not a lot of technology, and understand it's going to take time to integrate that. But I think just the fact that you see Starbucks embracing it and making it mainstream will surely help it trickle down into a lot of other places.
I hope so. There's something that I've been thinking about recently with regards to particularly Africa and our economy over there, the coffee economy over there. Given that there's a real boom in manufacturing over there, given the C price is doing what it's doing, do you think that people are going to be more incentivized to move into the manufacturing sector rather than coffee growing?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I think you've seen that happening in Kenya for the past 20 years, really, since I think coffee production there peaked in like the early 90s. You see that a lot in places where there's urbanization and people are, inheriting farms and thinking, I'm really, the opportunity is to go to the cities and grow there. So, I mean, I think that's a challenge, and particularly in any commodity market where there's prices up and down. But I think that's still, for me, it's like a lot of the work we do, say with like Benjamin Paz in Honduras, like our pricing and our understanding with him is pretty like irrespective of the C market, right? We're paying for quality, and I'd love to see more and more transactions move in that direction, away from the C market, particularly with what the C market's like between 115, 120. It's like, again, that's below the cost of production in a lot of countries. And so you're going to see people even just not even switching to manufacturing, but switching to other crops, switching to more profitable crops. And we may not see that now, but 2 or 3 years down the line, you start to see supply decrease from all the people who've switched now. And that potentially leads to higher prices, a number of years from now. which is much like what I saw when I was in Ethiopia. The C market was above $3.
Wow.
And 2010. So, and I think that was a result of 2004, 5, 6, seeing dollar sea level prices, people switch to other crops.
Yep.
And you see that manifest over time through like lower coffee supply.
We've got Diego Vizcaino. I can never say his name right, but he's coming on the podcast next week. He is a coffee farmer from Guatemala, I believe, and they have already started diversifying their crops.
Yeah.
To macadamia nuts and cloves and things like that, just because they can't be competitive. They can't keep the doors open and the lights on just farming coffee. So for them, they had to start diversifying very early on just to survive. I mean, that seems to be the reality of what's happening.
Yeah, I think the more time you spend in producing countries, you see this everywhere. I mean, in Ethiopia, people are growing sorghum and corn and coffee and 10 or 15 different things. And really, I think if you looked at like every coffee roaster's like placard for like the coffee they're serving, it's just various smallholders, because it's just little bits from here, little bits from here, little bits from here, but just the terroir and the quality is so great in Ethiopia that it turns into great lots of coffee. But I think you may start to see that in other places where, from smallholders, like just a smaller share of everything they grow will be coffee, because financially for their family, it makes more sense to be diversified.
Yeah, 100%. So we have been receiving a bunch of emails from roasters saying, I've been hearing what people are talking about. You guys are talking about traceability and transparency and all these kinds of things. If I want to do that, how do I start? Because right now I have no idea how to, like John Allen was talking about, relationship buying. So, and I know you guys do something that's almost exactly the same thing. How does a roaster start doing something like that if they're just a little guy?
Yeah, just a little guy. Man, I think a lot of it is just go out and expand your network. Go talk to people from bigger roasters. Go talk to other people in the industry. Venues like SCA and other like trade shows are great for this, because again, I actually think the best of our industry, and that we're very open, and in terms of sharing like where coffee comes from and relationships we have. We've definitely connected people to Ben Hameen or to Luis Pedro in Guatemala. Just get out there and talk to people, build relationships with other people in the industry. And I think that's going to help you then, build your relationships in producing countries as well.
So if people want to buy direct from a farmer, are they best off doing it in like a buying group? If they can't, let's say they only want to buy 10 bags from a farmer.
Yeah.
Is that enough for them to go direct to a farmer and say, hey, I want to buy 10 bags?
Yeah, it's probably going to depend on the farmer, but I'm going to say it's pretty tough, and it's going to make that producer's life harder.
Yeah.
I think I'm of the opinion to really, when you have relationships like that, like I want to make it as easy as possible for our producer partners to work with us. So for somebody who is like a little bit smaller, I think maybe those buying groups totally make sense, because you're going to be able to go in with like, cool, 50 bags or, anything like that is going to make their life way easier. And I think it's going to make the producer much more willing to embrace that relationship versus, I mean, it's just like us from like a wholesale point of view. If all of our accounts wanted like 5 pounds of coffee and 5 pounds of coffee and 5 pounds of coffee, 5 pounds of coffee, there's a lot of work that we do on our end to fulfill that. And it's the same, think about it. Think about yourself in the producer's shoes. It's the same that way. So,
and what are the kinds of financial things that people should be aware of if they're going to start buying direct from a farm?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, you mentioned some of the terms like X warehouse, FOB, what transit costs are going to be, understand that. And I mean, I encourage everybody, like, it's such a small investment to go visit the people you're buying coffee from, really, in the big scheme of things. if you really want to have a relationship, you should be there face to face. And I think that goes a long way towards you understanding what paying a fair price is, and tasting coffee at origin and tasting it when it comes back. But really, going to visit, you understand, and I feel like that just goes so far in terms of like the learning curve and understanding really what a fair price is.
Is it changing, because you guys at Cat and Cloud are fantastic about education with your staff and having them, experience is everything. You want your team to be able to experience firsthand a lot of this stuff. Yeah. And, I talk about that all the time, and that you guys are the champions of that for this industry. So kudos for that. And thank you for what you're doing for setting an example for other employers. It's fantastic and it's great. Have you seen firsthand that it has really changed the way that your roasters and baristas treat their responsibility with regards to this agricultural product after they've been at Origin?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you see it in every aspect. You see it in the care with the product, and we kind of have, when people go to Origin, and I think we've sent like a third of our staff to Origin this year, and people come back, we like ask them to give a presentation kind of about what they learned, and that's been like a really good growth experience for them to be able to communicate that, and then that kind of flows through to be able to communicate it to our guests and even to like other staff members, and just form that appreciation for there's so much more that goes on in the supply chain before the coffee gets to you. So I think there's nothing negative about people going and experiencing that. How
was it for you when you first started visiting the farms? Was it intimidating? I imagine it would be.
Yeah, I mean, anytime. I mean, I'm somebody that like I have to know everything, right?
You're a finance guy.
I want to know everything. So it's intimidating because you show up and it's so humbling, right? Because you essentially know nothing. And I think that's an important feeling to recognize and to embrace, that you know nothing, and just go with curiosity. And humility, ask questions. Right? Yeah, humility and curiosity. If you can do that, like, you'll be embraced there. And that, I mean, I think that is something that I am like scarred from my time working with nonprofits, particularly in Africa, is like, you see people in the NGO field going places and being like, I know how to do it, and you don't know how to do it, and I'm here to tell you the correct way to do it. And that just makes my brain explode.
Yeah.
So I think, the opposite of that, where you're, like you said, where you're going with humility and curiosity, and then you want to learn in partnership with the people who are the experts there, and you'll learn a ton.
Do you look after the forecasting for Cat and Cloud as well, the green forecasting?
Yeah.
How does one approach that?
That's it. Yeah, that's actually really awesome I love that you brought that up. I didn't prompt you or anything.
No, not at all.
Because
it seems like a mind fuck.
No, totally. And there's so much, right? Being the green buyer at Cat and Cloud, there's so much that I do beyond tasting coffee.
Yes.
And you get people who are new to the industry, and it sounds so romantic. Like, I want to be a green buyer.
I want to go to Origin and take.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll just taste coffee all day and travel. But you have to understand. Well, yeah, you just have to understand. I mean, from like a coffee roaster's point of view, your green coffee is probably the biggest cash outflow that you have as a company, and you're responsible for managing that. And if you manage that poorly, you're going to put the whole company in a position to where maybe they can't spend money on things that they want to spend money on or need to spend money on, because you've totally mismanaged that cash outflow.
Chuck, just a question there. Sorry. When you buy green coffee, do you usually have to pay for it before it arrives, or do you usually have to, do you pay the importer once it arrives? Sorry if that sounds like a dumb question. I've just never bought green coffee.
Yeah, no, and there's different ways. Like, So we do it. We do it probably similar to like a way a lot of other people, where you know, our importers, even for the direct relationships we have, our importers are holding the coffee. We're paying carry on it, which is an expense for us, right? We're paying interest on them holding the coffee, and then we pay for it once it's released to us. But that, I mean, that's a really big expense, because again, if you want to buy coffee seasonally, and if you want to buy the best coffee, we buy probably 75% of our coffee between, like, we have contracts for it between what, like March and June, right? Which are all the harvests, Central America, Africa. So we've booked 75% of our coffee there. It arrives, you know, June, July, August, September, right? And then that's where I'm creating the menu for that season until we buy again. And the other 25%, right, are like South American harvests, like Colombia, Ecuador, you know, other places like that, kind of fill in later in the year. But typically, sorry, to get back to your question, right, we're booking the contracts, then coffee's coming in, but we're paying carry on it, and then we're actually paying checks as it's released to us.
Okay. So it's still costing the company something to have secured that coffee.
Yeah, totally. Which is kind of the cost of getting the opportunity to buy the best coffee, right? Because you need to be out there securing contracts in February, March, April, to have access to those coffees, versus maybe just waiting and seeing what importers bring in, and then you're just kind of like picking and choosing from really like what's left over. If you're talking about like the top 10% of coffee in the world.
So one's proactive and the other is reactive. So you buy off a shelf rather than, hey, I like this coffee and this coffee and this coffee. I'm going to go and build relationships with the farms and make sure that I'm one of the people that's considered for this.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and you're booking it, but there's a cost, right, to that. And understandably, if you're a really small roaster, maybe you don't have that option. And you can still, there's importers that bring in, great coffee, so you still can do that throughout the year. It's maybe just not with the same intentionality of some of the companies that are going out and booking up front and maybe like paying a little bit more of that cost.
Can you share with us approximately what the price is of that booking that coffee, the carry-on fee?
Yeah, I want to say most carry is probably between like 8 and 12% a year. So it's like a pretty high of like the value of the coffee.
Okay, it's quite high now, huh?
Yeah. So that's quite high, and I mean, and that's
who do you pay that to again? To the
the importers are one, and that's a big part of the importing business, right?
I can imagine
them making carry on coffee that they're holding for people. One of the better systems I've seen in place at other companies is finding a partner who will pay for that coffee, right? So maybe it's like an investor or somebody like that, and it's not something we do, but I've seen this done at another company, where they have an investor who is the one buying the coffee as it comes in. So they're essentially not paying any carry. Somebody else is buying the coffee, and then they're cutting them a check purely based on the coffee that they use each month.
Oh, wow.
So that to me is kind of like,
that's diluting your risk.
Yeah, you're diluting your risk. I mean, like, you're just really made your payments really efficient. You're only paying for the coffee that you actually sold that month. And I think that's not a system that a lot of companies are able to find, but it's like, for me, just knowing that it's something I would love to get to a place where we could have a system like that, because it would hugely reduce our financial
overheads,
commitments, and it hugely improves your cash flow if you're able to do something like that. So I'll just throw that out if anyone.
Hey. And anyone who's going to contact me on it, I'm going to send you to Chuck, because I have no fucking idea how to do any of that. If I did, I would happily share it with you, but I've got no idea. I followed the idea, but wouldn't know how to execute it. With regards to forecasting, so how do you approach that?
Yeah, with a really intense Excel spreadsheet.
I imagine. Jamie Isets from Merit, she
Yeah.
said, I spend the majority of my time with my head in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, and it was cool because I like, you know, coming back from Africa and working at Verve for the 3 years I did, I kind of oversaw kind of all their business operations, but I also got to do a lot in green coffee, and so I did all the forecasting there as well. And it's, yeah, it's, you know, there's some like steps you can get through, right? It's a function of looking historically at the coffee you use, um, breaking that down by your different products and what coffees go into those products, almost breaking that down into like a mix, right? So, I mean, I could even say like really high level, you could break it down into maybe like your espresso blends and your single origins, right?
Okay.
And I'm going to bet that even though in coffee we really like to highlight our single origins and things, I'm going to say it's pretty much a fact that like the majority of every coffee company's sales are their espresso blends and
Yeah.
other types of blends that they have, right? So you're breaking your blends down into those components, and you're breaking your single origins down and looking at kind of those percentages. Really, you have to break it down into a percentage each month of what you're selling, and then forecast those percentages forward, assuming you think they're going to kind of stay. If you've seen like a similar trend in the past, you can forecast those percentages forward and then rebuild that number from percentages to pounds of each product into the future, and then break that pounds number down into bags of coffee from each origin.
How many?
That's super easy, right?
Yeah, right. How did you? Was that a learnt flow for you, or did someone pass that down to you?
It was, yeah, it was part learned and part created. I had a little bit of um, guidance when I was in Ethiopia, and there were some people. You know, the really cool thing about for me working in Ethiopia is I got to meet all these green buyers that came to buy coffee from the program, and just to pick their brain on how things work, and to dig into like some questions like this, because I, again, like everyone's like, oh, green buying, like that'd be amazing, I love to travel.
Yeah.
But like, you know, having this conversation with them and asking them like, oh wow, like forecasting, like how do you do that, and getting some like rough frameworks, and then I kind of took that and developed it to like the granularity, just based on my background that I wanted to see, and built that back up. And you know, I had some really great conversations when I was at Verve with Amanda Juris, right, who worked at Starbucks for a long time. She was a green buy at Verve for a number of years, and now I think she works for Keurig in Europe. But she also has like a really good strategic and financial mind, and so we had some really good conversations on forecasting and how it gets broken down as well. So yeah, part learn, part you have to understand kind of what you're comfortable with and the granularity you want to see.
And if you're working for the right people, they'll give you some direction on what they need to see as well, right? I guess if you're in green buying, do you? Jamie, who was on the podcast the day before yesterday, she has a degree in economics, and she said so she has a degree in economics and biology, and so this was the perfect, being a green buyer for her was the perfect thing. Do you think that?
And plants.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For her, she's like, this is the perfect career for me. Do you think that having that background in finance really gave you a leg up with regards to being a green buyer?
Yeah, it makes a lot of things so much easier than they would otherwise. Not to say, I mean, it's all just a learned skill, right? So I mean, the thing I think in anything that anybody wants to do, like if anybody listening or watching wants to pursue being a green buyer, the biggest, most important thing you can do is find a mentor.
Yeah.
Like I've had great mentors in every job that I've had. It's almost like one of like the factors of like what job I'll choose is like who is my potential mentor going to be, because a mentor really more than anyone else will help you grow your career in my opinion. And so just finding those mentors who maybe have understand that financial side of it and can work with you and teach you. Because I think anybody can learn it. It's just like a time investment and a desire to learn it.
Do you have like a formula with regards to the way that you keep your green on hand? Because was it a mentor that taught you all that stuff? Because I'm a massive believer in mentors. It's what forward why it was established. Did you come up with those numbers yourself, or did people who came before you say to you, you should have 6 weeks worth of stock on hand? Or
yeah, I will say maybe like the first job that I jumped into where I was managing the forecasting and things like that. There was a little bit of guidance, but I think for me, a lot of it was learned on hand. But yeah, just because sometimes you might end up in a company where the green buyer loves the green side of things and maybe doesn't love the financial stuff. So I mean, that's actually a huge opportunity, and that was my opportunity to come in and be useful and be helpful. And I got to learn, the whole green side of it, because I got to come in and be like, cool, I'd love to do all the numbers stuff and learn how that works. And so we got to kind of have this like symbiotic relationship. But yeah, just in terms of like holding coffee on hand, I mean, from a company point of view, you want to do it like Dell, right? You want to get your systems down such to where it's kind of like just in time manufacturing, right? Because again, it's like cash flow, and coffee is your biggest cash suck.
Yeah.
And so the more that you can have systems in place to reduce and make efficient bringing coffee into your company, roasting it, getting it out, that's only going to help you.
I hear time after time, I hear green buyers say, I want to have too little. I'd rather have too little than not enough. Do you agree?
You'd rather have too little
than too much.
Than too much. Yeah, to the extent that you never actually want to have to
run out. I mean, it's a dance, right? That line is where you want to be doing that dance, but not to the point where it gives you anxiety every 6 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all about reducing anxiety, and we just really simple things like having a par system, right? Using Cropster, having a par system, managing those like inventory levels, knowing like what triggers like a reorder for certain coffees. The more you can systematize it, even having an eye for like worst case scenario, some substitutability. If, right, there's always things that happen outside of your control, right? If coffee coming late or something happens, just
there's
having
a flood in the warehouse, whatever.
Yeah, totally. Like having a backup plan is super important. And even in the back of my mind, there's a few roasters that I know that like if we like absolutely needed coffee, like I could drive
over, grab some bags.
Drive down to Santa Barbara. I met Julia and Todd at the French Press would
this is where relationships. This is where relationships are everything, right? Like you can't just be that asshole that has their head in their roaster and just roasts and sells coffee to people. I mean, you can, but that's not going to really get you anywhere when you're in a bind.
Yeah, it's not going to give. It's going to be more stressful, right? If you talk about just wanting to run things like cleanly and smoothly and have backups, and just reduce the stress of things go wrong, there's fires that come up, and just what tools do you have at your disposal to help with that.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've made a major financial fuck up with regards to buying coffee? And I mean, does that happen? I don't know. I've never bought coffee, so I don't know. Is that possible? Can you get into those kinds of situations?
At Cat and Cloud, it hasn't happened. I'm gonna tangent for a quick second.
Go ahead.
Just to make people feel better if they do have financial fuck ups. Is one time when I was working on Wall Street, I made a $750,000 mistake.
Wow.
So just if anyone ever makes a financial mistake, you can look at me and I made a $750,000 mistake one time. But
tell me that you didn't learn a fuck ton from that, Chuck.
Oh yeah,
It teaches you so much, doesn't it?
yeah, details. I mean, it teaches, like, that's really what I take away from my time on Wall Street is details. Like, details are what separate the excellent people from like the good people. And I try to bring that to Cat and Cloud and what we do in the roastery and building out stores and in a bunch of different areas. But I think in coffee, what you can see, and I think what can be categorized as kind of a financial fuck up is having to reallocate expensive coffee to like maybe like a cheaper, maybe like a blend that you offer or something like that. A lot of companies have like a darker roast or something like that, and you see it in decaf as well, right? If like for people who are buying like containers of coffee, a container of coffee comes in and it's not what you thought it was, you're like, crap, I'll have to decaffeinate that, right? Because I can't release it as like an SO. So I think that's like one variation. Another variation, right? Again, it's like buying too much. People, this is one that I hear from people is like, I love Kenya, so all of our customers are going to love Kenya. So I'm going to buy a fuck ton of Kenya. And then you realize
Colombians.
you realize actually only like 5% of people really want to drink Kenyan coffee every day. Yeah, so they're like dark roasting all your $6 a pound Kenya to like move it, or it's like really old and sits there, and that ties up cash flow because because it's taking you 24 months to get rid of it instead of like 6 months. So I think
irresponsible buying, right? Because that farmer's taking that as sort of a cue from that, in that maybe this person's going to buy from us next year. Does that happen?
Explain that a bit further.
So in the sense that Jamie was talking about the fact that when you book some coffee from a farmer, they usually, especially if you're buying a lot, they're expecting that could be potential business for the future. And so if you're not communicating that back to them, that you made a mistake and you're actually not able to go through that can cause a little bit of problems with the farmer. Have you ever experienced that?
No, definitely. Like particularly like as you have more direct relationships and you're buying 30 or 40 bags from this producer this year, and you're with the expectation that you're growing, and then next year if you went back and you're only like, we're just going to get like 15 bags, they'd kind of be like, I think there'd be some confusion on their end because
was there something wrong with my coffee?
Yeah, totally.
No, I'm just a fucking moron. I can't sell it.
I just didn't pay attention to my numbers and I bought too much, and it's too bad because I think the coffee gets disrespected in a few ways. If you're holding really old coffee, it's not gonna shine maybe like it could in its prime. And like you said, you're kind of like, there's like a trust that's lost, I think, with your partner when that happens.
There was a coffee company, and I won't name who they are. I love them and deeply respect them. And they're elixir dealers. So the fact that they're elixir dealers is important because it shows that their clientele are happy to pay more for a luxury item. And so they took that as a cue that they might try some Geshas and a series of Geshas. And so they bought quite a bit of Gesha. And guess what? It didn't sell at all. Yeah. And that was, it's lucky that they had the cash flow where they could try that. But they're very smart financially, this business. They have really clever people saying to them, okay, if you want to do this experiment, this is how much you're allowed to spend, and it's not going to hurt our bottom line. But they had to wait a few years before they could get there to do that. So it's measured risk. Can we talk a little bit about that, about risk management?
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, I just want to throw in, it's like, I would always rather, like, for all the coffee that I've booked, book a little less than to book too much, kind of like we're talking about in this vein, because it's so easy, right, to go and you can taste a lot of coffees and find something to plug a hole, in your overall menu, versus like we're talking about, have like 20 bags of geisha too much, and because that's like that's the worst from like a business. And I mean, if you have, I don't necessarily have a boss. I answer to our company, Chris and Jared, but like, especially if you have a boss and they're like, why do we have these 20 bags of, 50 bags of coffee that have been sitting here for the last 12 months? Like, you really want to avoid that. So I'd prefer to like buy a little bit less than maybe we think that we need, and then you're able to like plug some holes, especially even with like different season coffees like South American or something.
I was saying this the other day on the podcast. I think people should approach it like a Stevie Wonder song. Stevie Wonder songs go for 2.5 minutes, whereas most songs go for 3 minutes, pop songs. And they were deliberately written that way so that you get to the end of a Stevie Wonder song, you've got just to the point where you're in it and you're having a great time, and then it ends. And so it keeps you wanting to come back for more. And so I think everybody should approach green bean buying the same way.
Totally. I mean, just to throw a number, like I'll purposefully buy maybe like 10% less than I forecasted that we needed, just as like a buffer.
That Farmer X that you guys got?
Yeah.
Like, you guys sent me a bag, we elixified it, and I'm like, I need to get my hands on so much of this fucking coffee. But the great thing is, then it's a flow-on effect with regards to your wholesale program, because then once people know that you've run out of it, it heightens their awareness of that coffee for next season. Yeah. And so when it does show up, they're going to be onto that coffee because they're aware of it. Yeah.
And you had such a good experience with it last year. Like, I think that's ideal, particularly, for us, where we want to have a lot of the same coffees coming back year after year, due to the relationships we have, and we want people left with that feeling each year, wanting, wanting that Farmer X or that, that Luis Pedro coffee or that Benjamin coffee. Yeah.
Can we talk? We don't have much time left. I know you've got a fuck ton of work to do, and I want to be respectful of your time. So there's two things. Well, there's so many things I want to talk about, but can we talk a little bit about risk management with regards to all this kind of stuff? Because there's such an important relationship between the financial side of green buying and risk management. How do people become more sensitive and aware of where their line is with regards to their risk comfort zones?
And do you mean just in buying coffee, or?
Let's start with buying coffee for the minute. With regards to, buying coffee.
Just and you framing it in terms of like from a cash point of view?
From a cash point of view. Yeah. So, I think that, and where this was ballooning in my mind yesterday is that when people don't understand where their comfort zones are, they tend to look at what other people are doing and base where their comfort zone is on what other people are doing. So, if we look at opening cafes, people look at what, let's say, you guys are doing, and you guys are opening cafes. So they're like, well, if they're doing it, maybe I should do it. And it's like, no, you probably should just check where your risk comfort zone is. And so, given that green buying is such a massive part of your cash allocation, right? How do people get to understand where their comfort zone is with regards to risk, and how do they maybe temper that as needed? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I'll start talking and you redirect me if I'm going in a different direction. Man, I think part of it is understanding your different sales channels, and maybe how quickly you can sell through coffee. If you're doing a huge wholesale or online business and it's really regular, or even a cafe business, I think the more consistent your use and your sales are, the more risk you can take.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. And then conversely, things that you're doing as like a one-off, or like, right, a lot of people do like geisha for the holidays or things like that, right? The more inconsistent they are, the more careful you want to be.
And with regards to that, I heard we got contacted by someone who has a farm in Hawaii, or they know of a farm in Hawaii, and 100% of this farm's business is with one customer.
Yeah.
And so can we talk a little bit about the relationship between risk and your diversification with regards to your customer base?
Yeah, totally. And that's, for me, that is really easy to talk about. I think the more cafes you have, the more consistent your coffee use is going to be, and the more wholesale dominant your business is, the riskier it's going to be. Because I think that's where you really see the potential to maybe not meet your forecast is, right? Because a lot of our best customers on the wholesale side grow into roasting, right? So as they get to be better customers for us, they actually get closer to totally messing up the forecast that I've built for the year.
If you're doing your job right, you're replacing them as a customer with the next cafe that's coming. If you've got a good wholesale team, right?
Definitely. But definitely. But it's like there's an inherent variability with wholesale, and with people starting to roast 300, 400, 500 pound accounts that move to roasting. It's like that's going to fall off, and that's going to increase the variability and your risk for like the amount of coffee that you've booked or have on hand. So I think that's the biggest thing. Just the more things are going to your cafes or your cold brew line or whatever, whatever it may be, that the lower risk you have on the coffee front.
And do you have a way of forecasting for those shifts? I mean, that takes experience, no doubt. I mean, for me as a business person, I had to fall over to learn that there was a potential of that bump ahead of me next time. Is there things that you had to do or that you experienced so that you now, actually, let me frame that differently. Do you look for those things coming before they show up?
Yeah, now I do. It was definitely something I learned while working at Verve, where I mean, again, like a few of the best wholesale accounts started roasting, and you see the variability in wholesale sales. If you can think about your cafe sales, even with some seasonality, you understand generally where they're going, hopefully over the year. With wholesale, there's total, ups and downs based on that. So I was lucky enough to see that before having my own my own company.
Learn on someone else's dime, right?
I mean, and so
the other big one is when you lose an account.
No, totally. Well, that's totally what I'm talking about. Losing a wholesale account where they're going to roast for themselves, or you just mean just that they've
someone comes and takes the account off you. That's something that we experience in Australia a lot. It's savage out there with regards to wholesale sales.
It's the coffee industry in general is really competitive, and for us, trying to build more of like a partner program than a wholesale program is super important, and part of our strategy to, like you said, to build partnerships with people where hopefully we have them as accounts, I mean, really forever, because we're looking at it from how can we make their businesses better, and so that they're, hopefully getting the value from us that they're not getting from anybody else, and that essentially we have kind of like a best-in-class wholesale program. But to the risk part, it's like you're never going to be 100% perfect. There's always people that for one reason or another, something happens, and it's tough to forecast for that. I mean, just understanding your variability and taking that into account. If wholesale is a big part of your sales, then maybe you have to contract a little less coffee and buy a little bit more coffee. Spot just understanding that you're going to have more variability, and that's just what you have to do as a business.
Is all of this learnt stuff, or that learnt on the job, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's all learned. I think it's best learned on the job. I think a lot of it you can have an idea of. Again, talking with people who are mentors or who have experience in the industry is huge to bring awareness. But I think there's no replacement for learning. Like sometimes you just have to dive in and experience as it goes, and that's you pick yourself up and do it again, you fall and you pick yourself up and do it again, and
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say just as long as you actually learn from every mistake and you don't repeat them.
And I often encourage people to look at what you brought to this situation rather than look at how everybody else fucked you over, because that's a victimhood position. Don't do that.
No, I mean, one of our like company values is ownership. And like, if anything happens, it's like, it's on me, right? It's not somebody else, because it's the minute it's somebody else, then you don't really have the power to change it. So we really try to empower all of our employees to, in any situation, in the cafe, in the roastery, in any department, like, take ownership for the things that happen to you or that you're involved with, because that's going to help you then be able to fix it. And we kind of approach wholesale from that. It's nobody took anything from us. It's what can we do to create the best partner program in the world.
Yeah. And you want to feel that pain point as a business owner, right? Like, there's no teaching, there's no learning better than feeling the pain point that comes from losing a customer. It really wakes you up to, hey, like, what happened here, and how can I do this better, and how can I be worthy of people's business?
Yeah, hopefully it makes you take a few minutes and reflect on like what it is that you do and what is your real value, and why do people do business with you. And I think just asking yourself some of those like simple questions can really actually help you discover some like profound thoughts and ideas that'll maybe like help things in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. And then, hey, it's something that I'm encouraging people every time I get either on one of these podcasts or on our Instagram lives. It's like, listen, people get into business. The right reason to get into business is not to make money. Well, that shouldn't be the only reason you get into business. If you're getting into business, I'd like to see people getting into business so that they can learn about who the fuck they are as a human, and to push beyond their fears, and to challenge themselves, and to learn how to connect with other people and build relationships and build a life that's filled with peace of mind, but in a way that's equal parts excited and terrified always.
And to be able to share that with all of your employees and all the people in your business. Like, that's, for me, and I know for Chris and Jared, it's like a journey together. And it's like, I would hate to feel like isolated in that, because it's like sharing the victories and even like sharing the defeats and learning together and growing together, like, and just creating a workplace where everybody is like, that's why they get up in the morning, and like, that's what they're stoked about, because that's honestly where you spend a lot of your life, is at work.
And
like, we want to create a company where people really, they're driven and they're excited to be there, and they really love what they're doing, and they're doing it within the framework of a team and with this other group of people. But it's something that they like, that they love doing, and
it enhances
that's like
their
what gets
life.
me jazzed. Yeah, totally.
I do have one more financial question to ask you. Again, I don't want to be disrespectful of your time, but can you explain to me how the C is set? Does anybody actually know? Because nobody can give me a straight answer.
Yeah, totally. Dude, we used to bet on, like, when I did Wall Street stuff, we used to, as like a hedge fund, we used to buy C contracts and stuff and bet on the direction of the market. But yeah, the C market is set. It's purely 100% like free market, based on the price people are willing to pay. And I mean, while that sounds really vague, right? It's the price people are either willing to buy at or the price people are willing to sell at, but it's an accumulation of everyone involved in the industry, right? There's Starbucks and Pete's and Green Mountain, and where they're buying coffee, and where they're maybe booking to maybe like sell contracts that they, right? If you booked a contract to buy, but you're like, I don't really need that anymore, or the price was too high, I'm going to book an opposite contract to sell it, and those will offset each other. So it's an accumulation of where everybody in the industry is buying and selling that quality. But as well, there is a huge like financial market outside of that drives the price that's more like speculative, that's based on, whether a lot of it's based on Brazil, right? Unfortunately, Brazil controls a lot of the C market, just based on being the largest coffee producer in the world and being the largest producer of coffee that fits the C market designation. So as Brazil continues to produce more and more coffee right now, that's in my opinion, part of what's driving the price lower
Down.
is there's all this cheap coffee coming out of Brazil. You know, things that hurt things that drive up the price are then potential like freezes or frosts in Brazil that reduce the amount of coffee that comes in. Because yeah, I mean, it is supposed to be supply and demand, and I think for the most part it is supply and demand. I think the financial markets then just drive those to extremes sometimes. But again, it's like the purpose of the markets is, and really on the financial side, is to provide liquidity so that there are people always buying and selling. And so that's part of, you know, the service of the financial side is to provide the people on both sides of the contract that are buying and selling. But, you know, at the base, it's really supply and demand. And as long, you know, looking at the market at like 115, 120, as long as Brazil continues to pump out more and more coffee, pretty much beyond what's being consumed in the world, that keeps prices lower.
I haven't checked it today. Is it still below $1? Do you know?
No, I don't think it's below $1, is it?
It was last week. Most of last week it was below $1.
Yeah, I haven't seen this week, but again, it's too bad when it gets to those extremes that are below the cost of production, because I mean, just like we talked about earlier, people stop producing coffee. And well, I mean, that's just how it gets back to equilibrium, right? People stop producing coffee, and then
it forces
2, 3, 4 years later, there's less coffee and prices come back up. And, you know, prices usually go to an extreme in the other direction. So there's always kind of usually like a range that it's traveling between.
So it really is just supply and demand. Like from what you're saying, there's the more coffee there is, the more coffee essentially the more coffee there is, the cheaper it's going to be. So it's going to drive the price down. Yeah,
if the amount of coffee that's produced grows faster than the amount of coffee that's consumed.
Yep.
You know, for the type of coffee that can fill a C market contract, because essentially that's what the C market is, right? It's a contract for X amount of coffee.
Yeah.
But for that type of coffee, as the amount that's supplied grows faster than the amount that's consumed, that drives prices down. And you know, the impact of the financial markets may just be to exacerbate a move in one way or the other, but ultimately at the base of it, you know, is the amount of coffee produced and the amount of coffee consumed.
And who holds those contracts? Who reports those contracts? So if let's say Nestle needs to buy a fuck ton of coffee, right? How does the C market know that Nestle is buying all this commodity coffee?
Yeah, they have a broker who's like interacting in the market with, you know, and that's kind of thing in the market, right? You never really know. You know, it's all brokers interacting, and you never it's hard to know who they're
buying for. And
yeah, exactly. Okay. But everybody's using their brokers to affect the market.
You just explained the scene. No one could explain it to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, dude, happy to.
Dude, I want to let you get to your day because I know that you just got back from Napa on an offsite team thing, doing one of the awesome things that you guys do with your team.
Yeah, we took our me, Chris, and Jared, and then our 6 members of the leadership team. We took them to a friend's house of mine up there for 3 days, and we do it once a year. And we kind of lock ourselves in the house and do, you know, kind of like the strategic planning for the next year of, you know, what's the direction going to be? What are our big priorities? What's everybody working on? And just it's everybody on the same page. It's you know, communication across departments, and it was really amazing this year, and our team really bonded a lot. And
great.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I'm so excited for what you guys are going to bring, not only to Cat and Cloud, but the example that you're setting for the industry long term. Like, you guys are doing great things now, but imagine what you're going to be doing in 10 years. That's what I'm excited for. You know, that's
me too. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where it is, and just little by little.
Yeah, well, especially Mapper Forward is all about like the long game. You know, don't just focus on what's going to happen this job and the next job that you're in, but what are you looking at building with regards to a whole career or the span of your business?
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, we do that. Like we look at like, we do like a 10-year, 3-year, 1-year look at like what our goals are as a company. And yeah, just like you said, like if you never put it up there on the board, then it's going to be a lot harder to get to than, you know, this is a like our big idea, what we want to be in 10 years, and then just little by little, or 3 years or 5 years, and then just breaking it down into like, how are we, if you really want to get there, you have to break it down into like little steps of how you're going to get there.
Yeah. Well, proud friend over here, gushing over the three of you and all of your team over what you're doing. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all the knowledge you taught me a fuck ton, sir.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I was just trying to leave you wanting more. So
like a Stevie Wonder song. And on that point, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Bye,
Take
mate.
care. Thanks a lot.